technique. All right. Recording.
I'm going to put my mobile phone on silent because otherwise it's going to ring. No doubt. All right, happy for me to start?
I am happy for you to start.
Right,
it's
excellent.
1 o'clock and I know you've always got such a lot to get through. So I figure start, and hopefully I'll let people in as they come in.
Sure. Excellent. All right. So thanks everyone for jumping on. And yes, this is being recorded. So and if any of the videos don't play in the recording, I will try and get a second, like another copy of this to you, Sheila. All right. So this is part 2. We had part 1 previously. So a quick outline of what I'm going to chat about today. So a recap of the pair selection that we talked about in the previous intro, the introduction process, like really super quickly, signs of pregnancy from hopefully a successful mating, maternity den setup, birth and mother rearing preparations, because that's super important, the early days after a birth, which are essential for hopefully the successful mother rearing. I'm going to talk about some cub development stuff and then just a quick summary of the whole presentation. All right, so quickly on pair selection. So we talked about, obviously, species coordinator. You work with them to try and select the best individuals to breed from, both genetically but also behaviorally. So genetic management, super important. But for me, I like behavioral selection is even more important. And in fact, I was just reading, there was a female tiger, an Amur tiger. She was literally just killed at a UK zoo through a failed introduction. So that male, she was very experienced, had lived with a male previously, don't know about this particular male that they paired her with, but he killed her and killed her very, very quickly. She was actually dead before the keepers could even intervene. So that's how quickly things can go wrong if we get the introduction and the pair selection wrong. So the important indicators we talked about, making sure that before we even think about introducing, we see appropriate interactions, that we choose tigers that are really well socialized. They've had experience with other tigers and ideally opposite sex siblings as well, that they remain with their mother for as long as possible. And if possible, if it's a social species, stayed with their father, or if it's a tiger, for instance, that they had access to their father through mesh, that they're comfortable with people because they're going to be living a life in human care. So we need them to feel safe and comfortable with us, because that's going to help in the future with our mother rearing process. And that they've ideally lived, not lived alone for longer than 6 months, because again, that goes into that socialization piece. We want these cats to be super comfortable and very familiar and very good at interacting with their own species, because that is going to help with the introductions. And then, of course, I have that large Felid behavioural checklist that goes into detail with all of the factors that I have, that I feel is going to help with a successful introduction of a pair, and even selecting the individuals to be paired. All right, so introduction success, this is what it looks like if you have success.
Video. That's a small area to be doing it in.
If they have access to.
So that is a very normal, I'll get rid of any commentary in the video, but that's a very normal introduction.
He would go around.
I don't know if someone's not on mute.
Oops.
Oh.
I didn't know if that was my video or no, but it's not. So very normal introduction.
Sorry, Louise.
That's all right. I can tell, I haven't got my camera on, but I can tell that's Mark's voice. So our female was receptive. The male immediately mated her, and we have that vocalization at the end, which usually signifies a successful mating. All right, so then we wait for a while and we want to know, is she pregnant? So signs of pregnancy, obviously a lack of estrus. If a female tiger is pregnant, they do have what is called a pseudo-pregnancy. And so that means that she will have high levels of progesterone for a period of time. And so we can't just use lack of estrus as a indicator of pregnancy. We need to look for other things as well. So pseudo-pregnancy often lasts for up to around 56 days, so around 8 weeks. After that, their progesterone levels will start to drop, and that's when we generally see that the female will come back into season after she's been mated. So the 8-week mark without estrus doesn't actually tell us that she's pregnant yet. We need to see other things as well. So increased abdomen, you can see on this female, she's lying down at the mesh. We took a photo of her with that lovely big round belly. So this is probably when she was at least 10 to 11 weeks down the track. The other things that you may see, may or may not see, depending on the female. Certainly if she's an experienced female, she's bred before, you may see mammary development in a brand new, like a mother that's never, or a female that's never given birth before, you may not see it. And then you also have to be in the right angle to be able to see it as well. Fecal testing. So we have done fecal testing with some of our tigers to have a look and see if they were pregnant. We've realized that we don't need to do that at all anymore, but it was nice to have this information. So you can see when she was mated, this is from 2011. So she was mated, progesterone rose up, and then by June, progesterone dropped back down again. Then we had another big, massive increase. Then it dropped down again, and you can see it. So we got these peaks and falls of progesterone. So from that, we knew that she wasn't pregnant at that stage. You may also notice a behavior change in your female. Some females could go from being a little bit more of a nervous type disposition to becoming far more relaxed. You might notice that they're just more chilled in general. In other females, you might notice that they have an increased hunger certainly towards the end of that pregnancy, particularly when they've got those rapidly growing little cubs inside them. So these are all little changes that you might see in your female, and obviously the better you know that you're female, the more you're going to pick up on some of the more subtle changes. So here's our beautiful mama lion. Now she'd already had several litters. I think this was her 3rd litter of cubs. So she was very experienced, but you can see that very large abdomen. And this is her at when she's resting in the maternity area that we created for her. And again, that lovely big large abdomen, which is obviously very obvious when you get to this stage of pregnancy, but it's those other signs that you can look for as well. Maternity den setup. So as soon as we know we have a pregnant tiger, so 8 weeks has gone by, estrus has not occurred again, now we're seeing abdominal increase, and we might see an increase in hunger and some behavior changes where our female just seems, a little bit more relaxed, a bit calmer. Then we're going to, by 10 weeks, if there's no estrus, we're going to set up straight away our maternity den. Now, we will have already done our preliminary work, though. As soon as the matings occurred, we're already measuring up, checking everything, getting our carpenters to prepare things for us so that when we get to that kind of 10-week mark, we go straight into action and implement and install all of the maternity area. So this is a look at our Sumatran tiger maternity area. So at the time that we had a birth in 2019, we had construction happening in the road directly above where the Sumatran tigers live, and that was for our African savanna area. So you can see on above the top of that mesh door, there's some kind of a thing hanging over. That's actually an acoustic panel to stop a lot of the noise from coming through from that construction site. And it wasn't hugely successful in stopping all the noise, but it certainly did help. And I should actually just go back, and you can see the front of her maternity den is completely boarded up with the plyboard, but there is a little viewing hatch there as well, just so we can see. So we want to set that den up at the beginning of the 3rd trimester or as soon as pregnancy is confirmed. Our aim is to create that disturbance-free area. So that's disturbance from humans and also from animals as well. So we're super careful about where we let our male tiger go, for instance, or we'll be super careful about where our lion family might be housed over this period. The maternity area needs to be this sacred zone just for your female. There was years ago a bit of a fallacy about first-time carnivore mothers, that they make terrible mothers, and I did do a presentation years ago at an ASFK conference on this, stress-related mismothering of carnivores. First-time carnivore mothers absolutely can and should successfully rear their offspring without any human intervention. So it's up to us to make sure that we set them up correctly, and they have, no reason why they won't successfully rear if we set them up to succeed. So with our maternity den setup, we want to plan so that you don't need to walk past that maternity den for at least the first 16 to 21 days. So for us, when we design our building, and I talked about this in our introduction PowerPoint, is that when we design our building, we always plan a maternity area into the design. If you don't have that luxury, which when I first started here, I didn't have that luxury. I walked into a building that had been built several years before I arrived, and so we had to make do with the setup that we had, but we still followed this exact same principle, that the building had 2 entrances, thankfully, so we could not walk past that maternity den while mum is in there. So that's the key. While mum is in there with her cubs, no one walks past that den for the first 16 to 21 days. We always provide our females with a choice, ideally of nests. So we want to give her at least 1 to 2 nests so that she can move the cubs, because all females will want to move the cubs at some point. And often that might be once they are getting a little bit older, or if they're, for instance, we had 5 lion cubs born. I do have a photo of that and a little video, but you'll see that the maternity nest does get a little bit dirty from 5 cubs being born, and so she did move them at some point. So we want to allow for that. Now, also importantly, at this stage, while we've got our, heavily pregnant mum, she's in that 3rd trimester, we want to have our birth and mother rearing procedure protocol set up and make sure our team and everyone else across our zoos is across it, so they're aware of what might be in there. And we want to keep the birth and mother rearing team to those that our female feels most comfortable with. And that sometimes means that we need to leave our egos at the door, and as long as there has to be an experienced person leading this, someone ideally that has experience doing this before or has contacted other zoos. If you haven't done this before, then contact other zoos, talk to those that have. But we want to make sure that whoever is going to be working around that female, animals are very scent orientated, so we leave our smell everywhere. It's super important that mum feels safe at all times. So that means people that she feels comfortable with, that she has a really good rapport with, are the ones that form that core breeding team. Now, when I say that, we always include here on our carnivore team, all of our keepers get included into the birth protocol down the track. But initially, during those first days after she's given birth and prior to the birth, we want her to be as stress-free as possible. So we just want familiar people only. So here's a little bit more about our setup. So this was our Sumatran tiger area. We've put that H8 slide was a mesh slide that leads into a holding area. Again, we've put plywood on that to reduce visibility, create this lovely dark den. Now, obviously, I turned the light on to take photos. We have slatted raised boards for our cats to sit on, and they're slatted because it allows for easy draining, etc. But when we have cubs down below, we don't want our mums taking, say, meat or bones up there and then dropping it down into the nest. We also don't want mum potentially taking a cub up there. The gaps between the slats are only about 1 centimetre wide, but we'd hate for a cub's foot to go down between those slats and then to be moved awkwardly and have, an injury occur. So we put a sheet of ply on top, so that way we rule out any issues with bones, etc., falling through, but also because generally underneath there is where we have a camera. So, and that camera then gets protected from any water, etc. It also creates, when the lights are out, with that solid ply on top of that raised bedboard, a darker area, more secluded area. Then we have our whelping little panel. So that's taken from the world of dogs, where we create the perimeter of the nest. And we want to do that because we need our little youngsters to be contained. So that sits about 30 to 40 centimetres high. We've got little drainage holes in the bottom of it, so that if you do need to wash the nest out, you certainly can. But that keeps those cubs contained until they're ready to not be contained, which is often from about 4 weeks of age. Here's another example. So this is our lion maternity area, much larger area. Doesn't look all that large in this picture, but it certainly was large. You can see we've got a note there, do not hose bedboard, because of the camera. There is a camera underneath there. Same situation, ply on top to prevent bones, cub legs, etc. If mum did take a cub. We generally haven't had a female do that, grab a cub and take it up there, but you never know. So, and same setup there with this board. This one's about 40 centimetres high because lion cubs tend to be a bit bigger, again with our drainage holes, so that we do have a way of cleaning out that nest if need be. Now, both of those dens, I should have mentioned, have got heated flooring as well. So heated flooring for the lion one for 50% of that space. And if I go back to the tiger one, for, again, probably about maybe 2/3 of that space for the tiger was heated flooring, concrete underfloor heating, so that we can carefully monitor temperatures. We can provide a warm space if they give birth in winter. Another example of the mesh setup, so putting plyboard up onto mesh, a viewing hatch, very important that before you enter that area, that you absolutely make sure that there is no dangerous animal behind the door, so you need that little viewing hatch. That viewing hatch is never ever open though while mum is in there. So obviously you've shifted your animal, you've done all your safety checks, then the viewing hatch is open just before you enter as a final visual check for safety. We would never ever open that while mum was in there with her cubs. And that's just another view of that hatch. That's the soundproofing that we did for the front of our tiger building, just because our maternity den was just down to the right of where this entry door is. So again, we're just reducing noise. And the other thing that we want to make sure we have is dedicated equipment, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. If you have airlocks in your building, we also plyboard off those as well. We just want to reduce as much noise as possible and reduce visibility as well for our females. So whatever we feel we can plyboard up to create that really secure, secluded environment for our female, we will do. This is just a little snip of our birth and mother rearing procedure. So this was obviously for our female lion. So you can see some of the stuff there. So 5 weeks before we put our plyboard up, we weigh our female, we want to monitor her weight. We start putting up cub proofing in our exhibit, our holding yard, making sure there's no big gaps for them. Increase our females' diet if we need to. So, you know, that's only if we need to. Some females you don't need to, but if they're using more energy than normal or they're telling you that they've got a higher food need, we might increase their food. We install all the birthing and nesting materials and then get all of our cameras installed, make sure they're all working. Other important things we want to do is discontinue behind the scenes tours. So no unfamiliar people are coming into the building, no maintenance crew coming into the building. We want to make sure we, you know, ideally that we've preempted all of that stuff beforehand and do any maintenance that you need in the exhibit. So, yes, so this is just that quick summary. So no unfamiliar people, discontinue all your maintenance works. We put small gauge mesh onto our den slides where the male or other family members may have access, mesh contact. And that's obviously to protect cub little paws, ears, etc. if they put them through to another animal, to make sure there's no injuries. And then we also minimize our handling of nest material. Once we've set that nest up and put the nesting material in there, we want to minimize putting our human smell on everything because we're leaving scent constantly, but we want to make that, again, a sacred place for that female, minimize handling of it with our hands. We'll use our dedicated equipment like our rakes and dedicated shovels, etc., to move, pick up straw, etc. Just very aware of our human scent footprint that we leave in our maternity areas. The other thing we want to do is make sure our females have got toileting areas. So she's going to be locked in, which we tend to lock our females in 7 days before the expected due date. We start to lock them into their maternity area. Now, that maternity area ideally is about 4 dens worth. So we're talking about maybe 60 or so square meters. We don't give them access to outdoors at that time because chances are they will give birth outdoors where it's not monitored, we haven't got cameras, we haven't got nest box set up there, and they're subject to weather conditions. So our female, we want to give her a toileting area so she's got a place that she can go and lock her away 1 week before. But every day then we reunite her. Every morning we reunite her with a male if she's living with a male, for a lion with her family. During that final few days, though, we're monitoring her every 30 minutes for signs of labour. So if she's out on display, we want to make sure that every 30 minutes we're out there looking at her. And if she shows signs of licking genitals, which is restlessness, potentially not wanting to eat her normal ration in the morning, then we're going to just bring her in and lock her into her maternity area as soon as possible. If you have the luxury of being able to just leave your female with access during that time, so that she can go into the maternity area as soon as she wants to, that's great. But then you'll need to be able to close her in as soon as you see those signs of potential labour. So every morning prior to entering a building to start your day, we always check our cameras, and we have monitors in our staff rooms so that we don't need to go anywhere near our tiger or lion or at the building where our female is. We check those cameras and we make sure that a birth hasn't occurred overnight or that the female's not in labour before we would think about entering the building. We also place minimal items in the exhibit and holding yards overnight or the day before, so that, for instance, if it was, say, cardboard box day, we wouldn't be building cardboard boxes out into the exhibit, because we're just mindful that once the birth has happened, we're not going to enter those spaces for potentially a couple of days. So we're quite careful about what we might put in when it's that close to a female giving birth. We also discontinue scented things from other animals. So we may, for instance, use feces from some of our ungulate species as enrichment. We discontinue all of that a couple of weeks before, just to keep our maternity areas a nice sacred place where it's only mum's scent as much as possible. So now we're getting super, super close to a birth happening. We've confirmed she's pregnant. We're getting things set up. So we want to make sure we have our monitoring equipment in place and that it's working. I know there's been a few times in the early days when we had not so great technology to use for these births, where literally the day before a birth is due, a camera stopped working. I mean, thankfully these days, much better equipment, much better technology. That rarely happens. But do make sure that everything is working, because once the births happen, you cannot go in and fix anything, tweak anything. So you want to check your camera angles, make sure that when the lights are out in the den or overnight, that the cameras are working, that so that you've got good footage, good monitoring. Decide on if or who is going to be monitoring from home. So we take a laptop home, and our keepers are on a bit of a rotational schedule to every hour. Someone gets up, does a quick look at the recording, and then reports to our vets overnight if labour has occurred or a birth has happened, because we want to know the first moment that labour is seen, first time you see contractions or the female becoming restless, licking genitals, because we need to know the process, so that if there is a problem with her giving birth, that we know when to intervene. So that brings me to the dystocia plan. It's really important that you plan for a potential difficult birth, because the last thing you want to do is be doing that on the fly. So we have a dystocia plan in place, and I'll show you. I've got a little example of one of those. We also discuss with the wider team and implement an intervention flowchart. So what happens if the worst happens? What happens if the cubs are 4 weeks of age and something happens and mum suddenly dies or becomes unwell and can't care for the cubs? What happens if she's not feeding them as well as what we hoped she would be? What happens if she dies shortly after the birth? So we have an intervention flowchart, and that will be guided. That's guided by the genetics of the pair, how valuable they are. It's guided by the age of the animals. There's so many different factors that you need to think about as to whether, that litter, how valuable that litter is, how much intervention you need to do. So that needs to be, again, the last thing you want to do is do that on the fly when emotions might already be high because you've got animals that aren't doing so well. So we develop that, and where everyone is very clear what the process is going to be in the event of XYZ. We get all of our dedicated birth and mother rearing equipment. So that's all our cleaning tools, our gum boots, boot covers, because we don't take any other animal smell into a maternity area. So we have boot covers or gum boots that live at the building where the animal is. We have overalls that we use, and we actually generally don't wash those overalls once that birth process has started. So there are some exceptions to that if they get really dirty or stinky or a cub is toileted on you. But generally we want to leave our overalls smelling just of the cubs and the nest. So we don't want it smelling like washing detergent. We get all of our nesting material. Back years ago, I remember we sent straw off to be autoclaved. We don't do that anymore. We just use normal straw now for nesting. It doesn't need to be autoclaved, but if we want to make sure it hasn't been subjected to, say, cats that may have, like domestic cats that may have gotten into the hay storage area and urinated or left feces there. We want to make sure it's good, clean material. And then again, diet increase, monitor your females. Every female is different. What I find more is that females after the birth, during lactation, which is quite, energy costly, that's when you need to carefully monitor the weight and increase the diet slowly to counteract any losses. We also need a management plan for all the other individuals. If you've got a group of lions or other tigers that you're managing, how are you going to manage those during this whole birth process? Because there'll be restricted areas where those animals can or can't go. And the other thing you need to do once you start to lock the female in at night is remove water from her actual maternity den. Now, she needs lots of water to help with lactation, but we remove it from our maternity den. We leave it empty, so there's no risk of a little cub, of her picking up a cub, accidentally dropping it into the water. So we have water for her maybe another 2 dens down. So it's a big distance for her to have to carry a cub. Again, if she starts carrying cubs, then we have to have a think about why she might be doing that and potentially put steps in place for that. So here's our Sumatran tiger dystocia plan that we developed for the 2019 birth. So this is just a history of the different females that we've had and different lions as well, looking at the normal intervals of start of contractions and when you would expect a cub to be born. So we had a female tiger that ended up having a difficult birth. So she gave birth to a single cub and he was stillborn when he was born. But you can see she started on this summer, if you can see it well enough. So at 12:20 p.m. contractions started. They went every minute, but then they decreased again. So we knew there was a problem. It was carefully monitored, and we were getting very close to an intervention. 7 hours lapsed between the first contractions and the birth of a stillborn cub. And then we have more normal birth over on the right-hand side, where we had some female licking her genitals at 9:38. Contractions then started a few minutes later. They then moved to every minute, roughly an hour after that. And then the first cub was born half an hour after that. And then roughly every 50 to 60 minutes was the interval between the cubs. So that's relatively normal. So it's important to have that information just so you know what you're looking at when you're watching the monitor. And so that we don't intervene if we don't need to, but we have all this information so we can intervene if it becomes necessary. So we have an intervention plan. So what to do if there's 2 hours of contractions, no progress, 4 hours and no progress, and then the possible causes of dystocia, which is difficult birth. It can be anatomical, it can be uterine inertia, it can be because the cubs are oversized, the position of the cubs, or there could be some birth defects. Either way, having that plan in place is going to really help to make those decisions when it's needed. Here's our lion cub our lion cub intervention flowchart, just in case we had an issue. And basically, we weren't going to hand rear those cubs because of the potential to breed again from that particular pair. But having that whole flowchart set out and everyone signing off on it just means that, again, the decisions are made and you just implement what's already been decided upon if the worst happened. Camera footage, so super important to have great camera footage, different angles. So for every maternity area, we have these 2 angles. We have a camera up in the corner of the den so we can see a long kind of view across the den, and then we also have the one directly above the nest as well. So that's just going to give us 2 different views. So you can see with this is the exact same picture. With this one, if we only had the camera in the corner of the den, we're not going to see anything that's happening in front of this female, whereas the camera directly above the nest as well means that we can see exactly what she's up to and what's happening. So here is a birth. So we've got already one little cub here. There's a contraction. This is a first-time mum, so she's got one little cub born. There was another contraction. See, she's lifting her leg, but that's also when some contractions are occurring. And there you go. There's the second cub there. So she looks a little bit bewildered at first. So there's this same birth, just the two different views that you get. And there we have a second little cub born. And mum investigating her brand new baby. That's the kind of footage that we can get, so that, we can get stills photos from our camera footage as well. And so we get a really good view of the cubs, and we can even identify the cubs as well based on these camera angles. Another view with a mama lion. So she had 5 cubs, and this is again her nest box camera view and her birth as well. I'm going to mute our voices. You don't need to hear us talking in the background. You can see, though, this is where she gave birth to 5 cubs, and the nest area does get quite messy, and because it's on concrete, it's not so easy for her to clean up. So when she does eventually move the cubs, then we can, and when the cubs are old enough for us to enter for the first time, we could do a very light clean in there. But having those second nest provides her an alternative place to go if she feels that that nest is not clean. All right. Why won't you let me go to the next slide? There we go. All right. So now just a quick note about intervention. So if you do need to intervene, and it's just something to think about, ideally where you can, you want to hand inject rather than darting. Obviously, that may not be an option though, which I totally understand. Darting is obviously a hell of a lot more stressful. If you can ask the female to come to a different den and be hand injected, fantastic. Sometimes people or vets will opt to give an oxytocin injection. That may or may not be needed, and that would just be depending on the individual situation. What we tend to do if we've had a cesarean, we haven't ever done a cesarean with a large Felid, but we have done with other species, before waking mum up, try to encourage the cubs to suckle then, because that begins that vital mother-cub bond, because it helps with that natural oxytocin. So say you've tried that, the cubs aren't suckling because they have had a bit of the effect from the anesthetic, then maybe you might opt for that oxytocin injection, because that helps with the uterine starting to shrink back to normal size, and it also can help with that initial mother-cub bond. If they can suckle, though, it does help with the milk letdown, and they're getting that vital colostrum. We have had cubs previously, and so I should say not cubs but pups, when we had our Asian wild dog that needed an emergency cesarean. Her pups were affected by the anaesthetic agent and they were not able to suckle, and so we did eventually have to hand rear them. So these days there are different anaesthetic agents that can be used that can minimise the effect on the offspring if they have a cesarean. So that's again something that would need to be discussed and long before a birth, so that you're ready to go with any anaesthetic agents to minimise the cubs being affected, because they may not be able to suckle, and it could lead you with less options. So plan all of that before the birth, so you've got everything that you need on hand. And in terms of hand rearing, mother rearing is always best for our animals, because they're getting the correct amount of milk when they need it, how they need it. They're getting that comfort. They're getting to learn species appropriate behaviours. There's so many advantages, obviously, to really setting our mums up to let them rear their own offspring, rather than us stepping in and intervening, unless, for instance, the highly genetically valuable mum passes, etc., then there would be a case to step in. But if we can, let's set our mums up really well. All right, so now the birth. So day of birth. I have made that little note. What we do next is critical to success. So, and in what I should also say is that stress-related mismothering occurs long before the cubs are on the ground. It can begin occurring while she's pregnant, which is why from the moment you have the mating, assume she's pregnant and minimize all stresses in that female's life. And that will hopefully then flow on to a successful birth and a successful mother rearing process. But certainly once she's given birth, it's really important, don't go near the area at all. Just monitor remotely, watching the cameras, recording all your data from the footage that you have. Stay way, way away. The mother does not need you to go anywhere near the area. Later that afternoon, you can feed all your other cats, lock them out onto exhibit if you need to. If you've got the setup like we do, where you can enter from one end of the building and not go anywhere near the maternity area, then you could lock animals out, feed them, lock them out, etc. So that, again, you're not disturbing. And you have someone watching the cameras so that if mum even flicks an ear in your direction, you get the heck out of there. So we do everything by monitoring via our cameras. We might then offer the female some food in the afternoon. In the morning, we don't. The morning after her birth, we don't offer anything. And I say the morning after, often they will give birth overnight. We haven't had a lot of mothers that started to give birth during the day. That's certainly possible, but often they will give birth at nighttime. So we might feed our female, and when I say that, we literally have a meat hopper that we roll food straight into her den, a couple of dens away from the maternity space. And if she wants to come out and get it, she can, but we just literally pop the meat in and we exit. We top up any waters with our watering can to minimize any noise. So popping a little watering can through mesh. So we always position our concrete water dishes or any other water dishes right next to the front of the mesh when we design these buildings, so that we can just top up waters with watering cans if need be. And then we just stay out of the building, stay way, way away, using our time to watch the footage, watching live, and also reviewing the footage to see how the process is going with her attending to the cubs. We don't do any cleaning for at least the first 3 to 4 days. So we don't clean the exhibit. We don't clean any dens that might be in the rest of the building. We just leave the building as much as possible, just providing essential food and water for mum and the other members, dad or other animals that might be there. But then from about day 4 or 5, so again, dependent on the female, we then slowly increase what we might do. For instance, we might lock dad tiger in or dad lion in, and then we'll enter the exhibit, do a real quick clean, put his enrichment out, send him straight back out again. And then we might enter his den and just pick up any bones, give his, bedding a quick tidy up, and then maybe if there's areas that needed a wash down, use a watering can quietly to do that. So we're just doing bare minimum. There's plenty of time to reinstate your cleaning, but right now, the first 8 to 12 days of a mother large Felid is bonding with her offspring is critical to success. And less is absolutely more when it comes to what we do and our, how we're moving around buildings, etc. Our presence is definitely less is more. Now, assuming that all is going well, then the next big milestones is our cub development. So for us, at around the 12 to 14 day mark, we start to implement a handling program with our cubs, because they're going to live a life in human care. And so we want them to feel comfortable with humans. And we know that we have a massive responsibility when we breed these animals to rear these Felids to be our successful breeders of the future. We want them to be able to be comfortable in human presence, in human care, and we also want them to be comfortable in the environments that they're going to be placed in, but also with their own kind. So from day 7, we might walk in. So if we've been putting food out for mum on exhibit each day from about day 4 or 5, and asking her if she'd like to move out onto exhibit on her own to eat. While she's eating for that 5 or 10 minutes or 15 minutes, however long it is, depending on the amount of food, we will put our overalls on, our booties on, and open the maternity den door the first day, which means some of our smell will be wafting in there, our scent, and then we close the door, leave, and then another day we'll do the same thing, but we might just step into the den, from about day 7 or 8. And then we will do a very quick photograph of the cubs and maybe a really quick handling of them. And that might be just looking at the sex, a quick wait, and getting our ID photos. So you can easily identify your young cubs, even though they might all look similar, just by the markings on the back of their head, but also at the top of the tail. So we look at these markings, the ones from the ear. So this pattern here, this one with a beautiful star on her head. This is Mawa, and she's just gone over to the USA to be part of their breeding program. This is the male tiger. This is Pemina. And then this is the other sister, Tenga, who we still have. So you can see each of those little patterns on the back of their head is unique. And so that's how we identify which cub is which. And say if you had all females or all males born, obviously if you've got a male, that's really easy to tell from the girls. But if you had all the one sex, super easy looking at the back of their necks to identify who is who. The other really easy place to identify them from when they're this little, and as adults as well, is the base of their tail. So we're looking at this point from here, just to here, just literally, I mean, as an adult, it's like the top 10 to 15 centimeters of their tail. They have also very distinct markings as well. So this is the male, really big, thick black section at the top of his tail. Then these lovely kind of horizontal lines. Mawa, she had a thick vertical black line. And Tenga, she's got a tail very much like her dad, Clarence. And we call her Miss Perfect Tail because she's got these beautiful horizontal lines across her tail. So super easy to tell the difference. You might be thinking, but you can't do that with lions, but you certainly can as well. So we looked at the pattern of spots on their spine. So male 1, obviously they didn't have names at this point. Male 1, this guy's now called Kari. He was very dark, a dark coloured cub, lots of spotting. And he had, you know, a fairly solid black line on his spine. His brother, much lighter in colour, and that black spotting it's not so much of a line. It's, you know, fairly distinct spots with literally very few down here. Then we had this female. She's got 2 cowlicks, one here, one down here, and she's got 2 dots closest to her tail, and they're joined. So you can see down there, it's like a bit more of a line. Female 2, much paler in colour. She also has 2 larger black marks below her cowlick. So she's got a cowlick up here. And then also has lots of little spots across her spine. And then the final female, no cowlicks at all. And this fairly distinct, you know, 2 dots on her back. So even though they might look like little spotted cubs, there are ways that you can identify them. And we could see those from our camera view as well. So with our handling program, once we've done that initial kind of weigh them, photograph them, and when we photograph them, you see all those photos, we're not picking the cubs up. They're on the straw nesting, so we're basically opportunistically getting photos of them. We're really minimizing touching them, having any hands on them. Then from about day 12, we start to enter for the first time. You can see this is Danielle. She's got her overalls on. You can't see her feet, but she's also have booties on. These little cubs in their nest area, still not quite ready to come out, and Danielle's just very gently touching them. When I first started, when we started this cub handling program, we used to actually pick them up out of the nest and put them on our laps. We don't do that at all anymore. That's really uncomfortable for the cubs, quite unnatural for them. So now we just sit outside the nest or sit in the nest with them and just very, very gently touch them. Something like this. You can see that's a super hard day at the office when you have to do that. But our aim is to not impose ourselves on these young animals, but to make interactions with humans at this young age positive and relaxing is the big thing as well. We want them to feel calm. We don't want them reacting negatively. We just want them to feel that in our presence they are safe and that, you know, we are a comforting thing to be around. Then once they get older, we start sitting and provided, so I'll just back up a little bit. So we do that initial handling of them when they're 12 to 14 days of age. We then reunite mum with them and we watch those cameras closely to see how she reacts to having our scent on the cubs and our scent in the maternity area. If she moves them, that's her basically feeling uncomfortable with our presence there. We then discontinue handling for at least 1 or 2 days before we would then go in and try again. So we judge whether we can begin our daily handling program based on our mother's reaction. So if she moved them overnight or moved them not long after we handle them, so one of those two options, then we will back off for a day or two and then go back in, you know, maybe day 15 or 16 to start handling them. What we've found is that because of the good relationships we have with our females, because the cubs aren't stressed, they're not vocalizing, they're not hissing, they're, you know, there's nothing to alert mum who's out on exhibit eating her food at this time, nothing to alert her that the cubs aren't safe, that they are not putting out stress signals when she returns because we haven't stressed them, that generally our mothers are fine with us doing that minimal handling. And it might start at 5 minutes and then eventually once mum's out and feeling much more comfortable being out on exhibit, as the cubs get older, we might be able to be in there with them for up to 30 minutes. We always have someone spotting, though, the female, and as soon as she says, I want to come back in, we immediately exit, everyone disappears, and then mum is allowed to come straight back in again. So here's another example with some lion cubs. This is when obviously they've come out of the nest. So we've got little bits of mince there. So weaning has obviously started for these guys. There's mince that the cubs are eating. And it's up to the cubs whether they approach us. We don't approach them. It's always got to be their choice. Again, we want this to be as positive as possible. You see there's different things in the den, some balls and browse, etc. And I'll talk about that in just a moment as to why that's there and what we do with that. So this is pretty much what a cub handling session might look like. And obviously these guys say if they're out of the nest, we are starting to prepare these guys for their vaccinations now. So they've got some plush toys, they've got food, and we also introduced some milk as well for these guys at some point as well. There you go, little one eating some mince there. So they can interact with us if they want, or they can just be comfortable, hopefully, with our presence in their space. All right, oops, sorry. All right, so we do playtime and novel environments for our cubs. We want to make them into behaviorally healthy individuals, and it means that while they're in that maternity den and they're confined to indoors and don't have full access to outdoors where there's grass and, you know, vegetation, etc., and that whole outdoor world, while they're confined to the maternity area under 8 weeks of age, we want to provide them with novel environments because there's, you know, research has shown that it does help with brain development, it helps with reducing stress and anxiety, and it just helps animals to be more well-balanced when they're adults if they've had access to a range of safe, positive, novel environments. So that's what we create. So you can see this guy's got his own little tiger toy. We get donations of plush toys from our retail department. They're always more than happy to give us some toys so that our young cubs can play with them. So again, so we get different toys. We've got Hessian sacks, we've got cardboard rolls, a whole range of plastic, plush and rubber toys. There's mum in with them. So we did this same program with mum. So not that we would give her these things on a normal basis, but interestingly, mum was safe to be around all of these things. I certainly wouldn't have given them to her on a normal basis, but we thought we'd just try. The fact that the cubs were interacting with all these things, mum did not destroy a single toy that the cubs had. Now, these toys were only put in there under supervision, and once our tigers were not out on display, all the toys were removed. They were never left in with the cubs unsupervised. So this was just something that was associated with keepers' presence, and it also made keepers' presence more fun and interesting for the cubs, because when we appeared, so did all this fun stuff. Here's our lion cubs getting to play with a giant donated rabbit. We call this their very first ever carcass feed. You see again, we've got browse, we have bamboo, we've got logs, we've got different things that we find that we can give to them just to increase their experience with the world. And just some other examples, different toys, grasses, etc. And Mama Lion also got to experience some of these. We know that she'd never had access to these prior to her cubs. She'd never had them for any previous litters. And thankfully, Mama Lion also didn't really destroy any of the toys. But same thing, once they were shifted out of that den, all toys were then removed. But we did want to see what Mum's thoughts were on some of the toys for the cubs. And she definitely approved. Once the cubs are growing and developing and they're all out of the nest, they will usually start eating meat. So this is the beauty of having our females rearing their own offspring, is that they can start those cubs on meat naturally. So this is a piece of meat that our mum tiger decided to leave and offer up for her cubs. I'm just going to put mute on for a second just because the mama tiger is drowning me out, but you can see some natural guarding behaviours have already started. So that's our young male Pemina, and he's guarding that big chunk of meat from his sister. And these are all normal, natural behaviours that they need to learn. It's important that they learn those behaviours now while they're young, which is the beauty of having siblings, because you can see that young female, she respected what her brother was saying and she moved away. Here's another example, Mother Lion. She's also left a bit of meat for her cubs. So there's a big bone. And this is, the best way to introduce them to meat. We start off like this with Mum just sharing a bit of her food, and then eventually we offer each of the cubs their own portion, and we offer them minced meat while we're in, supplemented with vitamins, while we're in there doing our interaction sessions with them as well. Conditioning, so we do need them to be able to come in when we need them to, so we could lock them into their holding or their den so that we can go out and service holding yards or exhibits. So we start our conditioning early. What we decided to do was place all of these wonderful toys into the den, so that when we called our cubs, plus there's meat as well in there, so that when we called our cubs, they hear our familiar voice. Our cue was just cub, cub, cubbies, which you'll hear in a minute, that they recognize that, and it creates that really positive association when they hear us call with this fun space to come into. And so you can see that in process. And that's Mum right next door. So it also helps that she's calling them as well. So we've got her secured separately, just because otherwise she would go and eat all the meat, but also she might potentially take them all back out again. So we know there's an incentive for her calling them, that they will come in, but then when they come in, they've got something fun to do. Next step is meeting Dad. So for a tiger, we don't do physical intros with Dad, but we certainly do mesh-to-mesh intros. can see there's small gauge mesh on that slide to protect any young cubs from dad's feet. And dad is Clarence, so hopefully he's going to appear in a second.
Louise, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Lydia's got her hand up for a
Oh,
question,
sorry,
I
I
believe.
can't see any questions because I've got full screen. Yes.
I've just popped my question in the chat. What age would you start to do intros with dad? And is mum having intros with dad external to cubs if that's her norm?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So with Kartika and Clarence, this is our latest, pairing and cubs. They had mesh contact fairly early on, but mum, there's dad there. Sorry, I'll just pause that for a second. So we allow our mum and dad tigers to have mesh contact throughout the entire birthing process. But for instance, mum might have 4 maternity dens, and dad might have just 1 den at the far end of the building. So she has to leave her maternity area, travel throughout the den system to have that mesh contact with him. And we like to do that because we want our fathers to be familiar with the sounds, eventually the sight and the smells of the cub. So we want mum talking to dad, she'll be covered in cub scent when she goes to talk to him. So she basically can talk to him whenever she wants, but she has to travel a distance to get to him because we don't want dad anywhere near the maternity den. Same thing with lions. We set the exact same thing up with lions. Mum can go and talk to dad or the rest of her family, for instance, anytime she wants. But again, she has to travel throughout all of the dens that we've given her to get to the male or to her family. And same thing, she carries the scent of the cubs. The other animals can hear the cubs, and eventually once the cubs leave the nest, they can have interactions through this small gauge mesh. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so mum has access all the time, but at a distance, so she can leave the cubs and go back and see the
correct.
family. And then
cubs, whenever they can willingly leave the nest on their own and approach the adult, which is generally around 4 to 5 weeks of age.
4 to 5, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So here's that interaction with dad. Clarence is just behind the mesh, and beautiful moment. Dad and son, I think, have that contact. And of course, mum's right in there saying, Dad, this is our babies. Don't hurt them. We don't do physical intros though with tiger dads. They have mesh contact though, for as long as possible. Even now, Clarence has mesh contact with his son and occasionally with his other daughter, who's now moved to a different enclosure, whenever we can do that.
And when would you recommend physical contacts for lions?
Lions. So we're just going to look at that right now.
Okay.
So meeting dad lion. So obviously we do the same process as I just mentioned. For lions and tigers, they have that constant mesh contact if mum wants it, and then the cubs from 4 to 5 weeks of age when they can leave the nest themselves. With lions, we introduce cubs back in at 9 to 10 weeks of age. So this is dad. Now mum is always there. We never ever introduce a cub without mum. Mum's there. At this point, we were like, Mum, why are you not in there? Because it looks a bit scary. Atto, he's a first-time dad. So this is his first experience with his own cubs, but you can see he largely takes it in his stride. But we do it slowly and carefully, and literally we might start with 5 or 10 minutes for the first day, and then we build it up over time. Next big hurdle is your vaccine. So we actually, by going in and doing our handling program every day, we can manage to get all of our vaccines done stress-free without having to pick them up, without stress. So you'll see in a minute, cubs are asleep. Our vet nurse, which is actually one of our carnivore team, she was a vet nurse. She's just tenting the skin. We just put that over just in case cubs suddenly turn around, and we don't want anyone getting bitten. But cub stays fast asleep, gets the vaccination. Completely stress-free, and cub is still fast asleep. That's like the ideal. So we were able to do this for the 8-week, 12-week, and then we brought the final vaccine forward for lions and tigers 1 week early to 15 weeks. And the final vaccine, we actually used mincemeat smeared or milk for them to be lapping while we did the vaccination. So they didn't need to be picked up for that. The only thing we do pick them up for is when the vet wants to do the microchip and health check. So they listen to their heart, do the full health check and give them a microchip. That's a bit more stressful. For that one, we make sure mum is way out of earshot and we take them to an area where mum's not going to hear them, because they do tend to get a little bit stressed when they get their microchip implant. Some of them do, some of them don't. Weighing is important. We introduce that from an early age as well, so they're familiar with stepping on scales. And then you end up with eventually putting them out onto display. So this is the first time that cubs went out on display. Prior to that, they'd been used to going into a grassed holding yard, but this was the first time. You can hear the cameras clicking. Media are there. First time that they went out onto the big exhibit that we have. We didn't send them out with Dad for this lion family because we wanted Mum to just manage it, because we didn't know exactly what the cubs were going to do. We didn't want them to go running and then maybe Dad chase them and something go wrong. We do the same process for female tigers. From the time they've had that first vaccine at 8 weeks is when we would start to get them used to going onto exhibit. But prior to that, from about 6 weeks, they have access to a vegetated holding yard. And then the final one, big day with Dad. This is the first time Dad goes out with his family. You can see the cubs. The cubs are quite a bit older. They've got lots of experience being out there now. We wanted that before we put Dad out, but you see they're quite curious about being out there with their dad. Curious, cautious. Keeping their distance a little bit. But we've done all the den introduction. So Dad was very used to and familiar with having his cubs around at this stage. All right, so summary quickly. So basically we want to start off by working collaboratively with the departments we need to select the best parents. We're going to take our introductions nice and slowly, develop and implement our birth and mother rearing plan, develop also our dystocia plan in case of a difficult birth, and our intervention flowchart in case something goes wrong. We want to always make sure for every single mother, doesn't matter whether it's a large felid or a goldfish, we want to set our mothers up for success. We want to provide them with disturbance-free environments. They don't need us to help them do this in the wild, but what they do need is for there to be minimal stress on our females throughout the entire process, from the time mating happens through to her cubs being fully weaned. We want to make sure that stress is minimized. And often we don't realize that our presence, because we feel like we've got a really good relationship, but when you're a mother and you've got young cubs to care for, our presence can be stressful, whether we intend it to be or not. Other animals' presence also can be stressful. So we want to prepare our maternity areas, really have thought about it prior, prepare those areas and get all our equipment ready ahead of time. And then just allow Mum to do her thing, the thing that she knows how to do. Our job then is, once the cubs are old enough, to socialize those cubs with the world, prepare them for that life in human care. To do that best, you want to research wild cub growth and development, and then try to mimic those major timelines that they would hit in the wild. Raise our cubs in enriching and novel environments to help them grow, develop, and be the best that they can be behaviorally. So successfully introducing and breeding our large felids is just one piece of the puzzle, but the second piece of the puzzle is to create those behaviorally healthy individuals for now, but also for future generations of our cats, but also for our keepers as well. All right, thank you. And I will shut this big screen down, so if anyone's got any questions, I can see you and hear you.
Thanks so much, Louise, for another wonderful presentation that was really informative, and great videos for sharing. Does anyone have any questions? I know we're running a little bit late, but
yes.
Hey, put your hand up now, or otherwise drop us an email and we'll do our best to answer them. Louise, if you could send me a copy of your plans, then we can put that on the Facebook page so everyone can access them, if you don't mind,
Sure.
as well as on the Google Drive. So we hopefully we'll be able to get those videos uploaded that way so people can refer to them as well.
Easy peasy. All right, excellent. I'm always around, so if you have questions, if you're listening to the recording of this presentation, just reach out to me at Taronga Zoo. We all have the same email address. It's just lginman@zoo.newsouthwales.gov.au, and that's Ginman with a G.
Well done. Look, you've done this once or twice before. Very professional, very professional. Well, I don't see anybody's hand up, Louise, but again, thank you. This has been a great presentation and we really appreciate your efforts in this space. So thanks
pleasure.
again.
Pleasure. Thanks so much.
Okay. See you later, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Louise.
Pleasure. See you guys.
Thanks, Louise.
Bye.
That was an amazing presentation. Thanks.
Thank you.